Howdy. Welcome, everybody. Episode 19 of Anomalous America. And this week we dive deep into the rabbit hole that is Ohio, continuing working our way up the Mississippi. And, hardest, a good problem to have is the hardest thing about putting this whole thing together was sorting material and picking what to cover or what I think I could cover in 2 hours, which is, there's never enough time. I never even get through half my material, but this was incredibly difficult. But yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for being here. Glad to keep the tide rolling, so to say. 2 weeks in a row. Keep sending that positive juju. Kiki Mancy, good to see you. It's been a long time. Thanks for joining us. Yeah, barely got this one going. The 2-year-old's not feeling well. Was running a fever yesterday, and I barely got this one together in time. For those of you who follow me on Twitter, you'll see I had my thread finished about 20 minutes ago. So happy I could get it all figured out and sit down and find time to do this. Because let me tell you, it's pretty difficult here at my house. But yeah, everyone's trickling in. Welcome. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, the chat, about doing these later versus early. I've definitely noticed a different crowd, than doing these at 5 in the morning. Hopefully we can keep getting more and more people in for these videos. I'm not sure if 4 or 3 or 5 and Pacific Standard, blah blah blah. All that stuff's tricky trying to figure out a way to get these up and going. Wow, Luis, thank you so much. Appreciate the donation, brother. But yeah, like I was saying, kind of a review. Last week's episode, Indiana, and kind of continuing the theme that we've had so far through this whole thing. What lies beneath? Perfect time for me in Asia. That's awesome. Missed your posts. Seen you, Kiki. I've seen you posting a little bit more. Felt like it was quite a long hiatus. Hope everything's good with you there. But yeah, getting back on track with Indiana. And again, talking about themes. What's kind of the underlying theme with this whole series is that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and not just a single culture, but several, and kind of unpacking, so to say, or maybe just trying to wrap our minds around this whole idea of whatever lens you look at it through, resets, Tartary, whatever it is that you look at, the whole idea of past, present, and how history's kind of been manipulated or at least altered in this area that we inhabit, and not just we as Americans and people stateside, but the entire realm. I've done episodes on tiny little islands to Europe, Asia, America, Mexico, South America. The same thing is realm wide. The continual, almost cyclical reset. Civilization, Earth takes over, wipes the slate clean. New civilization grows and flourishes. The slate's wiped clean. And this continual theme, almost like a design, right? Whether you attribute this to the kind of simulation theory or, this world or realm or planet or sphere, or whatever descriptors you use to describe it, definitely seems to be mechanistic in a sense. But yeah, just presenting the information. Oh, Abby, thank you so much. Really appreciate the donation, guys. It means a lot. Like I said, taking time away is difficult. So just having your eyes and the viewers here, let alone the donations, it means a lot. But yeah, so I don't want to overstate my opinions or um, kind of get caught up in trying to establish some kind of narrative. I try to keep my lens as clear as I can, and that way, whatever material comes my way, it's kind of like as organic as it can be, and provide some kind of entertainment. I hate to kind of use that word, a bit of a misnomer, but when it comes to information like this, I want it to be um, something that you can take and run with, and maybe go and do your own investigations, or I don't want it to be negative. I think that ultimately this reality is what you make of it. And it's down to the individual. And your word is your wand, so to say. Fabulous book. Your word is your wand. And not only the things you think, but the things you speak, um, in a way, develop the world we live in and your world, right? It's micro to macro, and it's as above, so below, and it's all of these things. The world we inhabit is a mirror of our inner world, is the outer world, and the upper world, heavens, or whatever you want to call it, is a mirror of the lower worlds. And these cultures I cover often show that in a very pure sense. Not only in their quote religions, their worships, but the way they laid out their cities and the way they built their buildings. And but yeah, so long intro, but again, I'm grateful. Just kind of wanted to recap and give a little bit of time for people to get in and join the chat here. But there is so much material to cover, and again, in the description, I'll have a link to my thread on Twitter. You don't have to use it; it's completely up to you. But again, you don't need an account to view my thread, and you can just use it as a kind of way of reviewing things, or if you want to go back and read some of the articles at your own pace, that's fine as well. The thread here that I've made, let's just go ahead and jump into present here. And again, everybody, for those that have just trickled in, welcome and thank you for joining me. I'm just going to kind of show this, and we'll kind of just do a quick little peruse through it, look at some of the pictures, and then we'll jump into material. And yeah, so like I said, the theme um, ultimately is we stand on the shoulders of giants, and who are these giants? Whether or not I'm speaking literal or figurative there, but it's both, right? Previous it's civilizations that weren't coming out of the Stone Age. They oftentimes were very advanced, and kind of asking ourselves the questions, what is Rome? Where was Rome? These biblical locations, these biblical stories, did they really happen in the Middle East? Where is the Middle East? Where is Jerusalem? Where is Babylon? Where is Canaan? Is it Canada? Um, asking these kind of questions that, believe it or not, 200 years ago, the writers that I've often shared are asking themselves the same question. They're finding so many proofs in the record, hundreds, tens, fives, tens, 20s, hundreds of feet below the ground level here, all across the realm, that make you almost invert the ideas and stories that have been given to us in locations. And as I've often said, that not only do the maps have many anomalies, but texts and stories seem to continually discredit one another. But yeah, so like I said, let's get into the material here. Time is precious. I plan on going for till about 6 o'clock Pacific time, 9 o'clock Eastern. That's my goal. So we'll try to stick to that just so everyone has kind of an idea. Yeah, let's get full screen here. So again, Anomalous America, episode 19, Ohio. Um, and let's just get into it. I kind of start my threads the same way every week or every episode, so to say. I share some maps just because I love these old bird's eye maps, and we'll just peruse through some of these images. Cleveland, Ohio. This is a really early one. This is, I want to say 1880, 1870, something around there. These can be anywhere from 1850 to the late 1890s. Columbus, Dayton, Sandusky, Lima. Again, usually I'd spend more time on some of these, but for the sake of time, we're just gonna quickly sort through. That was another one of Sandusky. I just like this point of reference. And CO. Um, I had a whole um kind of mini presentation. I tried to put out, a video every 2 days or so, and this town was going to be one of them. And it was about the crazy amount of oil and coal formations and all kinds of crazy stuff they found below this town here. And, this was the oil capital of the Midwest. And as you can see, even people had oil wells on their in their backyard. It may be kind of hard for you guys to see, but there are dozens of oil wells here. Um, much of this town existed, and then when they found oil, they just started planting wells everywhere. And yeah, it's just crazy. Like I said, they're in people's front yards, backyards. I mean, they were commissioning these companies like, hey, I get a cut, and you can put a well here, and it was just they were just sticking them everywhere. And yeah, pretty pretty funny looking picture. 1899. I don't know how quite to pronounce that. Maybe someone could say it in chat, but Sio. Donavi, welcome. Um, and Toronto. And then just some exposition images. Cincinnati hosted 4 exhibitions, which was news to me. All the way from 1870 through 1888, I believe was the last one. But yeah, just some interesting art. I always love the exposition drawings they did for these. Symbolism is key, where it's always so Grecian and Roman and, royalty, European. What is European? Since the 1879. I mean, it's just crazy. I couldn't believe how many they had. I remember one specific year, 1888, because of an image I'll share. But here's some art. Here's the music hall. I mean, unbelievable. This one I thought was really cool. This is uh, typically a grain elevator, but from what I could find in research, they stored all sorts of stuff. But this tower um, was an elevator for unloading large ships. Beautiful, beautiful painting. The Masonic Temple in Cincinnati, and the University of Worcester. There are so many incredible. Again, if I had more time, I'd share. I probably got 50 different ones of these, and the amount of gigantic universities in this time frame, like just that narrative alone, we can't keep up with from the horse and buggy, the amount of population. When you look at the size and scope and magnitude of some of these university buildings in the late 1700s, early 18 mid 1800s, it makes absolutely no sense. I talked about this in my Texas episode a little bit, where I showed that many of the older universities of Texas, 4 or 5, I think I mentioned, are built in the 1800s in the middle of nowhere. There's not even a building for hundreds of yards in these images. It's just something like this standing alone. It's like, when you build this like in a city where there's a populace to support a university of this size, but often you find they're out in the middle of nowhere, and they have quite a substantial basement on most of them. Just a few images. There's so many of Columbus and Cincinnati alone that would blow your mind. I mean, the buildings there were just like so many others. This one's poor quality, and I hate that it is, but something I wanted to touch on was that this is another amazing one. It looks like Germany, you know, somewhere in Europe, the art building. This is 1888. Um, and I know the quality again is pretty poor. It doesn't look so bad on the stream. But this is the gondola. So Lake Erie ran into this exposition. Now, Lake Erie, the Erie Canal, sorry. And the Erie Canal, as we get farther into this series, maybe we'll start talking about some of the canals of the eastern states. But the narratives there don't make any sense. They're just digging them out. But yeah, they shipped these gondolas from Italy, and I talk often about the narrative Italian, Venetian overlays between America and the Mediterranean, quite extensively. And this picture was taken in 1889, a year after the exposition. But I know it may be hard to see here, but the the canal it looks like 100 years old. The stone is incredibly worn. It's covered in old moth growth, and yeah, it's supposed to be a year old, and it just doesn't add up. So I just wanted to throw that one in there. And there's the last image. And before we jump into articles full speed ahead, and people get lost in me endlessly reading, I'm just going to kind of go through chat here really quick and just do some shout out. Williams, welcome. Jen Tugon, good to see you. I was at Worcester a bunch coaching Sun Soccer Olympic Dev program, and it's amazing how I saw none of this at the time. Yeah, cool. Art, you live in Ohio still? That's a cool to see a picture like that. Yeah, these universities are just mind blowing. I talked a lot about them in my California episode. The universities of California, they don't make any sense. They too stand in a field by themselves, monumental buildings, in the 1850s, 1860s, when again the population is barely supposedly getting off the ground, and it's predominantly blue collar workers. Lucy Rose, Dayton, big on culinary arts. Welcome. William, log cabins. They are separated by less than 50 miles. Charlie, Brett. Oh, Brett. I was talking about Sandusky, Brett. Did you just have the bat signal go off in your head? Julie, Days, Zal, Noah. Take a little trip with me, everybody. Thanks, guys, for being here. 140 people. Off to a great start. But yeah, without wasting any more time, let's get into some juice here. We're going to start with just a little bit of mound builder, stuff like that, and what lies beneath, more stuff like that. I'm just going to kind of do a quick little review to give you an idea of what's coming, just so I can formulate my layout a little bit. Caves, hidden tombs. So my 2-year-old's worked his way up here. Ancient animals. Oh, this is a really interesting one. I wonder if we start here. No, we won't start there. Mounds again. That's a big one again, guys. Ohio was considered the mound capital of America. In the mid 1800s, they had counted over 10,000, and unfortunately, even in the mid 1800s, they were already talking about how the government had to step in because the plowman had been just absolutely destroying these mounds. And that's in the 1850s, and a lot of these articles are post that. So you got 20, 30, 40, 50 years in some cases where 99% of these mounds are destroyed. What's inside doesn't get reported. So again, it's a blessing to even have these very few accounts. Will, thank you so much. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for being here. So yeah, mounds. Oh, we have a visitor. Hey, bud. Okay. Okay. So my little one is going to be humming along, I suppose. But yeah. What, Bubba? No, I need my headphones. Yeah. I need my headphones, bud. I know. I gotta wear these. I gotta hear. Okay, so let's jump right in. Prehistoric find, 1891. The remains the remains of the king of the mound builders dug up in Ohio, Chillicothe. Mr. Warren K. Moorhead and Dr. Cresson, who have been prosecuting excavations here for the past 3 months in the interest of the World's Fair. I apologize for any background noise, but the little one predominantly wants me when he's sick. Go figure. 3 months in the interest of the World's Fair have just made one of the richest finds of the century in the way of prehistoric remains. These gentlemen have confined their excavations to the Hopewell Farm, 7 miles from here, upon which are located some 20 odd Indian mounds. On Saturday, they were at work on a mound 500 feet in length, 200 feet wide, and 28 feet in height. At the depth of 10 feet near the center of the mound, they exhumed the massive skeleton of a man, which was encased in a variable copper armor. The head was covered by an oval-shaped copper hat. Where was I? Oh boy. The head was covered by an oval-shaped copper cap. The jaws had copper moldings, and the arms were dressed in copper. Plates and covered the chest and stomach. On each side of the head, on protruding sticks, were wooden antlers ornamented with copper. Now, this is really important part here because I talk about this in a previous Anomalous America episode. How you keep finding some of these highly ornamented, um, kings or whatever you want to call them, in some of these mounds that they obviously held some high rank in the area. They often have these antlers, and I show the correlation between Cernunnos and this deity that existed predominantly in Ireland, a little bit in Scotland, but he's found all over the world, and he's often carrying, he's tied in with the serpent, and kind of these druidic rites as well as these pagan um, rites, and you find that the druids and the khans and the brahmins and these priest kings um, have very similar iconography. But yeah, so here you have this man of obviously high esteem, completely covered in copper armor, and he's wearing the antlers that are also wrapped and ornamented in copper. The mouth was stuffed with genuine pearls of immense size, but much decayed by the ravages of time. Around the neck was a necklace of bear's teeth set with pearls. I'm going to take a quick little pause here, guys, okay? And help my little one. One sec. Oh, okay. Like I said, I wasn't joking when I said it was difficult, and I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to get this episode off the ground. I appreciate your patience. But yeah. So where were we? Again, the mouth was stuffed with pearls, and around the neck was a necklace of bear's teeth set with pearls. At the side of the male skeleton was also found a female skeleton, the two supposed to be man and wife. It is estimated that the bodies were buried where they were found fully 600 years ago. Now remember the time frame here, and that we're going to kind of show that 600 to 800-year time frame that so many of these authors are guessing, because that's really what they're doing. Seems to be fairly accurate, and we'll talk about some of the carvings we find in these mounds that show a particular date that's right around that time frame. Messrs. Moorhead and Cresson consider this find one of the most important that they have yet made, and believe that they have at last found the king of the mound builders. Let's go farther in here. Threads on Twitter are never as efficient as they should be. So sorry for jumping around. So yeah, juicy one, covered in copper armor. Now again, when they test some of this copper, they find it to be that that famous Michigan or Great Lakes copper, and the reason they can easily correlate that with Michigan is the composition is unlike any copper found anywhere else in the world, and it has unusually high levels of silver. Now this copper's been found, from Nova Scotia to Oregon, all the way down into South America. And we'll make more correlations outside of the copper relations to this kind of worldwide trade that existed. This copper has been found everywhere. In fact, one of the biggest markers in a historical sense that they used to show that the Phoenicians were trading in America was that they find this copper all over Europe, all over the world, really. But even the narrative of it just being distributed as well as it was around the Americas and into South America really kind of destroys this whole caveman-esque narrative that exists in the mid 1800s into the 1600s 1500s. These kind of stories handed down from the Cortez's time, and the expeditions that had made their way to Europe and were actually written down, that we find you kind of handed to us in that so-called history, right? His story, showing that it's quite a different set of facts here. And again, remember that time frame. We're going to be dealing with right around anywhere from 5 to 1,000 year time frame. 50 skeletons, Ironton, Ohio. Recently, the finding of some 50 skeletons and parts of skeletons on the farm of Luke Kelly attracted wide attention. At first, it was supposed the remains were those of victims of river pirates, but the latter discovery of prehistoric implements fixed them as the skeletons of mound builders. Now, remember, the term mound builder is a bit of a misnomer, because not only can they not properly correlate the time frames, it seems to extend over a time period, again, that goes almost back 1,000 years, maybe even farther. And again, so much of my series has been talking about what lies not only 1 but 2 or 3 levels below what they're finding at surface level. So, who came before the mound builders, the quote mound builders, or yeah. Interest in the discovery spread, and it is now a well-established fact that at Proctorsville, a few miles above this city, are the ruins of a buried city. The streets were paved, and there were aqueducts and many evidences of refinement. The city must have been large, though a great part of it happens to have slipped beneath the Ohio River. It is believed that proper excavations would reveal a world of treasures. Now, again, looking back through so many of these episodes now, a small excerpt like this, would be hard to even really um, corroborate beyond, right? Like, oh, that's interesting, but what do we have to take away from it? But this is a narrative that's I've demonstrated in every single episode leading up to this one. A cave discovered, Ohio, 1880. Adams County, in which comes from a reliable correspondent, gives a marvelous and almost incredible account of the wonderful relics of a lost race discovered in the subterranean chamber of a cave, which has long been known, by whose upper chambers, though regularly formed, contain nothing of special interest. In this newly discovered chamber have been found a splendid mausoleum, and superimposed a couch with the effigy of a man reposing upon it, the head covered with a winged cap or helmet. A winged cap or helmet. Okay. Remember that kind of Romanesque, Grecian-esque designation. The hands clasping a bunch of leaves resembling the oak, most delicately carved. Tombs of a humbler sort are arranged along each side of the chamber. One of these was broken open and a finely preserved mummy found, the figure measuring 9 feet and an inch in length. On the wall were 25 portraits, possibly those of the ancient governors of Ohio. Spearheads, hatchets, spades, cups, plates, all of copper, were also found, and a book of thin plates of copper, curiously engraved, and many other articles. The exploration is not yet complete. Oh, yeah. That's kind of going to be a theme here, Roman Grecian theme here. And we've started all the way back in episode 1 in Alaska with the same thing. They kept finding, quote, Greek and Roman styled art, tiles, vases, paved streets. Same thing. This is from Alaska, and here we are. We've gone all the way down and around and back up the Mississippi. And here we are in Ohio, finding these same things. A great, well, it's kind of jumping around, but why not? Again, I had to throw this together, so the order might be just a bit off. A great petrified snake found with a human skeleton in it. Carlisle, Ohio. Isaac Straw, a farmer near El Raya, while digging a cistern, unearthed one of the most wonderful specimens of geology science ever found in this country. 17 feet below the surface in a marl deposit, he found the skeleton of an immense serpentine alligator containing the remains of a human. Its length is 21 feet. The 7 feet of tail is composed of 17 rattles. What a interesting creature. It certainly doesn't exist now. The colossal skeleton of a man holding a stone hammer with the same tenacity he did when the monster swallowed him lay in the huge stomach. Now, again, I didn't have enough time to get all my petrified articles here, but they find all kinds of crazy animals that we definitely don't have walking on terra firma any longer. They found several skeletons of what they called a giant kangaroo, and it's been hypothesized that this is kind of the misnomer of the Tyrannosaurus Rex, like where they got the idea. But in this time frame, they're describing a creature that stood 25 to 30 feet tall, stood on its hind legs, that it looked like a kangaroo. It had a large tail that could support its body weight, and they imagined that it could leap 50 yards at a time. They even went as far as to say that perhaps the animal was a bird, and that the wings, because of the creature, had um, decayed so thoroughly that the wings are made of such hollow, thin bones that perhaps that they had decayed. And they theorized that this thing could be a giant dragon, but they stuck with a kangaroo, and they said perhaps it was even aquatic. Now, you find this same type of description of skeleton. It's not just one fluke. In fact, they found a very large version of this in California, and if I remember correctly, it was over 100 feet. This kind of reminds me and makes me think of the dragon, the whole dragon skeleton they found in a cave below ground in Utah. But yeah, petrified prehistoric life. And remember, Ohio has insane coal beds too, and they find all kinds of crazy stuff. All right, we're going to get into this one, and then it's going to kind of lead us on a bit of a tangent. Remarkable antiquities in the interior of America. Now, this is from I want to say the early 1800s, very early, because if you look close, it's still written in Middle English. Besides those ruins in the Illinois and Wabash countries, which have been often mentioned, there are others no less remarkable, many hundreds of miles further west. Now, this is going to cover a few states, but it's the part that we're going to focus on is going to hop back into the Ohio area. And particularly in the country about the Great Falls of the Mississippi. As we approach these falls, commonly called St. Anthony's, we frequently meet with pyramids of earth from 30 to 70 and even 80 feet in height. These are, most probably, the tombs of the ancient kings and chieftains of this part of America, though there are others which I am inclined to believe were erected in consequence of some signal to victory, and possibly to cover the bones and carcasses of the slain. In digging horizontally into several of these pyramids, a little above the base, we generally found a stratum of white substance, something like moist lime, and glutinous withal, extending in all probability several yards within, or perhaps nearly the whole length of the diametrical line. I have every reason to believe this consolidated, chalky substance to be the remains of skeletons buried perhaps 200 centuries ago. Again, 200 centuries ago. I don't necessarily agree with those time frames, again, judging by how far down we go and we keep finding a different group of people and then a different group of people, but no less, much, much older than originally conveyed, especially even nowadays. And covered by time and the operation of the elements, converted, I apologize, into their present state. Many tokens remain on both sides of the Mississippi of that country being in an ancient ages as well cultivated and as thickly inhabited as the country on the Danube or the Rhine. One need only go back through my episodes again, predominantly Illinois and Missouri, where I talk about the Mound City, St. Louis, and the giant buildings. These are giant structures. They weren't tombs. It's predominantly the ones in St. Louis and across the river. And that these giant buildings, because again, the deeper down they go, they found they go several stories underground. They find subterranean highways connecting all of these mounds. Now, certainly some of these mounds were burial chambers, but many were not. And we blew this wide open when we started showing some of these quote mounds in California. It started in California, but working our way into Colorado, where they find whole mountains that they describe as oddly conical, looking like it's been shaped by the hands of man, saying they look very much like the mounds on the eastern part of the Mississippi. And then they dig into them and find them to be huge structures with dozens of rooms, sometimes hundreds of rooms. In fact, the largest ancient structure ever found is a building 6,000 plus feet long in Colorado, over a mile long, thousands of rooms. Now, these buildings were monumental, housing millions, if not billions, of people. The canal systems of Arizona, California, Colorado, New Mexico that are ancient and well documented as existing long before, um, quote, Europeans or Westerners, even the quote, Aboriginals could support a very, very large agricultural populace, in the hundreds of millions, I would say. But yeah, back to the article. Converted again. Many tokens remain on both sides, as thickly populated, like I was saying, as the Danube or the Rhine. And I agree, I say even more populated, which fully proves that the literary have been too hastily in denoting America a new world. Again, it proves that the people writing the history books, have been too hasty in denominating America a new world or an original present to the Europeans from the hands of rude nature. So yeah, the opposite. And again, I think this is from the 1820s and maybe the 18 teens. When you see this type of Middle English, the transitory periods between English as we know it today and this, you can date it to, late 1700s, very, very early 1800s. A copper mine was opened some years since further down the Mississippi, and to the great surprise of the laborers, a large collection of mining tools were found, several fathoms below the superficies, I don't know, it's written funky, of the earth. Another person, in digging for a well, discovered a furnace of brickwork 5 fathoms below the present surface. And in this furnace were found a quantity of coals and firebrands, which for aught we know might have been kindled in the days of Moses. Now remember that part because we're going to talk a lot more about Moses. Some years since, a copper mine, okay, that's the same quote. My apologies. Not long since, at a spot on the shore of the Ohio, where the bank had been washed by the undermining of the water, a stone dropped out of the hardest kind of black marble, about 7 pounds in weight, having, having 12 equal surfaces, each surface being mathematically equilateral and equiangular, five-sided figures. This does not appear to be a lusus nature, but a work of exquisite fine art, the offspring of human ingenuity. So before I finish this off, again, we'll go back. The finest black marble, having 12 equal surfaces, each surface being mathematically equilateral and equal angular, five-sided figures. That's a dodecahedron, guys. Okay. So in the early 1800s, gentlemen along the Ohio River, this just falls out, buried deep down in the earth. This just falls out on the ground. Okay. The dodecahedron. Now, that's incredible alone. But when we keep talking about Romans and Greeks and, our idea of, Plato and Pythagoras, it's I think the correlations get quite interesting here. But yeah, the dodecahedron, the symbol of the universe of ether. Kepler. This is a fantastic book. Primus Geometris. For anybody that's interested, I'll have it in the description, but you can look it up for yourself. It's free on archive.org. He talks quite endlessly about the symbolic nature of these platonic solids. And I actually have the platonic solids part of my tattoo, and his relation to it being kind of the universal shape of life. And but yeah, and here they are finding a incredible. Obviously, we're not dealing with a primitive race here. And yeah, going with the narrative that I've been touching on so much is where did the Grecian and Roman histories really begin? But yeah, where was I? Near the falls of the Mississippi, there is a salt spring in the bed of the river, which has been closed with some stonework of unknown antiquity to keep out the fresh water. In times of freshes, however, the river overflows the stonework and mixes with the brine, so that it does not afford salt to the savages hereabouts till the river is considerably fallen. In several places, circular fortifications have been discovered in the same country. They are constantly enclosed with deep ditches and fenced with a breastwork. Again, I talk a lot about how star forts aren't just found in Europe, they're found all over America. They've just been completely buried or dismantled. Okay, so this article I've been reading is from 1792. So I was close on my guess there. So 1792, this is what they're finding. And yeah, I've talked a lot about forts. We're going to talk about some interesting ones here in Ohio. Yeah, so ditch work, large walls, fenced with breastwork. I mean, they actually even use terminology to describe them that they're basically just like the citadels of Europe. From these and many other familiar remains of antiquity, one would be inclined to think the world much older than it has been commonly imagined. Again, from these and many other familiar remains of antiquity, one would be inclined to think the world much older than it has been commonly imagined. Now, remember what this author was stating earlier, that the the writers of our history were too hastily in describing this area as the New World. Aristotle affirmed it to be eternal, and no arguments have ever been brought to confute him. Several tribes on the western side of the great river above mentioned, that's the Ohio, date their national existence for more than 20,000 moons. and the Indians of the Eastern would go immediately farther into the depths of time, though both relate many events of these different periods that are evidently mixed with fable. March 17th, 1792. Again, why this ancient Roman object still remains a mystery. The Roman dodecahedron. Okay, here we are. But is it, what is Roman? And that's kind of what we're trying to blow the lid off. What is Roman? Is it American? What is, again, what is America? Obviously, that's a newer name, but you get what I'm saying. But yeah, the dodecahedron. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Platonic solids, it's worth a deep dive. Um, I would imagine a lot of you at least have a concept of it. But when we get into the ether, from a alchemical standpoint, but so much more, um, it really makes you think. Was Pythagoras, um, you know, even some of the um, there's a story amongst the Cherokees that Europeans came here to learn about these things. Even the Cherokees say that the Europeans, philosophy, science, geometry, mathematics, were coming to America to learn about these things. And this kind of buried history seems to support that. Prehistoric fort. I think after I read this one, we'll read a few more fort ones, and then we'll jump into a book that's quite amazing. And another source I'll provide in the description that you guys can go and look through. It's an entire book written just about the amazing forts found in Ohio. At the latest meeting of the Maryland Academy of Science, says the Baltimore American, Dr. Dalrymple read a paper prepared by a corresponding member of the Academy, Mr. Thomas J. Brown of Waynesville, Ohio, upon the mounds of the Miami Valley, and describing particularly Fort Ancient. I'll read a longer article perhaps after this one, if this doesn't cover enough about Fort Ancient. Warren County of this state, Fort Ancient, Warren County. This mound, by its location, is singularly adapted for defense on the top by a high wall, almost detached by deep ravines from the plateau of which it forms a part. The walls are very irregular in their direction. A country road runs through the enclosure formed by the opposite wall, entering the eastern gateway and leaving by the western. Under the bed of this road is a hard, graveled road made by the builders of the mound or the fort, as it should more popularly be called. The ramparts at one point measured 4 rods across the base and from 16 to 20 feet high. The walls were built of earth taken from a deep ditch upon the outside, which is yet visible. The prevailing rock of that region is blue limestone. There are about 50 openings in the wall that were probably filled with palisades. There are several large excavations inside the walls, averaging 150 yards in circuit, which contain water at all seasons of the year. They were thought to be reservoirs for supplying the garrison. By digging into the walls, stones may be found sometimes made in a sort of rude wall. Again, this is kind of the narrative that they put up when it comes to some of these mounds, and how they, when they find, oh, these mounds are actually covered in some cases in 8 to 10 feet of earth. Whether or not a giant wave covered them in debris or just the ravages of time, but they find in many of these very exact stonework, brick, large stone. These aren't just piles of dirt pushed up on the edge. Made into a sort of rude wall, and under these stones, human remains have been discovered. Pieces of pottery are also found upon the surface, and at a point outside the walls are evidences of a manufactory of flint arrowheads. The growth of trees at this place indicate its great age. In looking at it, one concludes that it was built for military defense. The entire length of the walls is nearly 5 miles. 5 miles. And this is one of dozens and dozens and dozens just in Ohio. And if we go back to my Missouri episode, I talk quite clearly about one particular fort that's on a plateau similar to this, probably built in a very similar manner, where the walls were over 100 feet tall and they were made of stone. Some brick. I mean, obviously, I think they're working predominantly with whatever's available in the area, but it's not just crude digging a ditch. We're talking about advanced stonework, bricks, you name it. The growth of trees at this place indicate its great age. In looking at it, one concludes that it was, yeah, so I already said that 5 miles. A great number of smaller mounds scattered around the country suggest the probability that they were used as signal stations by the mound builders. Remains of road are seen from the main fort to the small mounds outside. Yeah. So remember how they described a advanced paved road, and I mentioned that earlier that they found a buried city with paved regular streets. So we're dealing with a huge metropolis with highways of advanced road work that have been buried. And this is just what's on the surface level, under a few feet of earth. And these citadels, castles, Fort Ancient by other authors was considered to be a castle, and they dug deeper down and um, found it to be a place inhabited by a very large amount of people that they said, due to the way that the excavations grew and were added to over time, that the city must have slowly grown with its inhabitants, likely living within the walls. And I do agree with the idea that many of these mounds were markers, sighting markers. In fact, they find them, a lot of them, along the Mississippi, and a lot of these canals have the same thing. We covered some of these mounds that they had sighting markers in Arizona. So we're dealing with a trade, such a high level of trade that you have canals that I would hypothesize you could enter on the East Coast and take a river, whether man-made or natural, all the way to the West Coast. And in some cases, these canals are absolutely gigantic and are hundreds and hundreds of miles long. Just take some of the canals in Arizona and California. These canals are still used today. In fact, they found them that to be so advanced when they were digging them out that they couldn't build anything better, and that many of the bases and bottoms of these canals were a form of terracotta unlike anything they'd ever seen, and so advanced they had outlasted several floods and had been buried, over the course of who knows, 1,000 years perhaps or more. But yeah, so connecting these forts, these viewpoints, these castles, I think, star forts up on these hills, and from there we're going to jump real quick. I don't want to say real quick. What are we at here? It's almost 5 o'clock, and 178 of you in here. Thanks for joining me, guys. Those who are late to the scene, appreciate you being here. This book is called Description of Antiquities Discovered in the State of Ohio and Other Western States. We're predominantly could be just obviously talking about Ohio. We're going to look up Fort Ancient, right? The one we just described. We're going to talk about maybe one or two more here. I don't want to spend too much time in this book. Again, you can look this up, Descriptions of Antiquities Discovered in the State of Ohio, and archive.org if you want to dive deeper into this. Newark. Right, that probably wasn't what it was always called. It's like 200. Sorry, I just want to get back to where I was. You have to check out the book, so you needed a account. You don't have to pay for it, just a heads up. Sorry, I'm just going to scan through and try to get back to the. I read like 100 pages of this book to get ready for this episode, and I had picked a few pages, and of course, it signed me out. You only have 1 hour, but that's more than enough time, and you can just continually check it out. It was like in the 200s. Anyways, let's just go full size here, and I'll just kind of show you. Oh, here we go. Was it Mount Perry, Marietta? Hmm. Was it Newark? My apologies. It's annoying that I lost my page. But maybe we'll just look at a few of these pictures to give you an idea. And that there's dozens and dozens of these. Um, for those of you that may be kind of newer to my channel, I had a conversation with Stellium7. Check out his channel, and we talk a lot about some of these forts and how they're all built on top of these buttes, these what they were calling terraced, because they're so flat. But what I had theorized them to be, tree stumps. And that, like we had shown with some of these mesas in the American Southwest, that they found tunnels in every single one of them. And that water, spring water, very clean spring water, was found within these mesas or buttes, hilltop forts, as they call them, further east. But the technology is the same. Whether they, in some cases, they say obviously these weren't built for defensive purposes, and then in other cases they say quite the opposite. But the Native Americans, quote Native Americans, Aboriginals, say that their fathers and their grandfathers have no history of the builders of these things, and that they stayed out of them. Um, in some of the wars, they ended up inhabiting some of them. Um, but yeah, I mean, just look at some of these very advanced, you know, mathematical precision. You can see more of them here, right? Like here's basically what they're describing in that article I just read. Um, but showing you all the way along the river here that they exist all around. Man, there was quite a really important point I wanted to make. Fantastic book, by the way. So I'm just going to scroll through here, and if you want to spend more time in it, you definitely should. They call this an ancient racetrack. Ancient parallel walls, supposed to have been erected for a place of amusement. Now, we're going to talk about some articles before we end here where they talk about ancient Grecian drawings inside these caves that are Roman chariots. Were the Roman chariot races here in America? Well, we've shown that the horses, um, the origin of the horse as we know it, finds its origins here. Same thing, references of parallel walls. They said perhaps continuations of an ancient racetrack. I posted this on my Twitter. This is a keg found in a mound in Ohio. Look at this thing. That looks very European. Some of the idols, quote, idols, they go as far as to say that they were kids' toys, dolls. Some pottery. Yeah, I'm going to search. Towards the end of this book, the author makes some very interesting points that I've been making throughout my series here, correlating. Here we go, 201. Yeah, let's go here. Let's go here. And we were just there too. Perfect. Okay. For many ages, we have reason to believe there were none but such altars. Now they're talking about these mounds, right? That they were used in religious ceremonies. Some were, some weren't. Some were burial places, some were buildings, as we've said. From Wales, they may be traced to Russia, quite across that empire to our continent. Across it from the mouth of the Columbia on the Pacific, right? I talked about mounds here, right outside my neck of the woods here on the Columbia River, to Black River on the east end of Lake Ontario. Thence turning in a southwestern direction, we find them extending quite to the southern parts of Mexico and Peru. In the Russian Empire, mounds are numerous, and where everywhere and where everywhere we seen by the learned Adam Clarke in his tour from St. Petersburg to Crimea in the year 1800. In his travels in Russia, Tartary, and Turkey, the author, in speaking of the country between St. Petersburg and Moscow, says, now this is important, conical mounds of earth, or tumuli, occur very frequently. The most remarkable may be seen between, I'm not going to even try, and Valadi on both sides of the road, but chiefly on the left. And they continue to appear from the latter place to Dedrova. Now, back to episode 1 of Anomalous America, we talk about hundreds of frozen conical mounds that they found in the middle of nowhere, Alaska. Conical mounds frozen. Again, making the correlation that we're dealing with the time frame before the quote ice age, and that the ice age is a relatively new event, at least in respects to the time frames that we've been given to describe them, and that in a very recent history, Alaska and much of uh, America, the northern latitudes, were in fact tropical. But again, the conical mounds of Earth, the tumuli, occur frequently. Professor Pallas has given a representation of 4 of those tumuli, and blah, blah, blah. They are common all over the Russian Empire, right? And they're common all over Alaska, and they're found all the way down the Mississippi. There are few finer prospects than that of, in one of my recent episodes on Mexico, I talk about these conical mounds, and I relate them to Uxmal, where they find the most conical mounds in Mexico. And they correlate that there was a town in Italy, an Etruscan town, named Uxmal. And that this author goes as far as to say that the conical mounds of Italy, the Etruscan mounds, remember the Etruscans, they built conical mounds, match identically with the conical mounds of Mexico, the Mississippi Valley, and again, the ones we've been showing here, that I've been showing here, found in Alaska. And as this author is stating, remember this guy wrote this whole book about the mounds of Ohio and the Mississippi Valley, predominantly Ohio. And he's saying that they find them from Wales all the way into the Mississippi Valley. There was one more part here. They seem to mark the progress of population in the first ages after the dispersion, rising wherever the posterity of Noah. Right. Again, and I correlate this kind of age of Noah and the family of Noah. These ideas again of where's Greece and Rome, who are the Greeks, how could Alaska have been tropical very recently in our time frame? Thinking about the idea, and I've done some videos on this, about the vapor canopy. Did the vapor canopy fall very recently? It seems very likely. Could that have been the kickoff of the ice age? And this, the idea of Noah and bringing these things much closer to the time frame, and that the deluge was related to some kind of worldwide event. This vapor canopy seems to support this theory. I think it's a blend of scientific as well as religious and mythos. But again, you can check out my videos on that. They include some articles from the 1800s. Whether under the form of a mound in Scandinavia and Russia, a barrow in England, a cairn in Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, or those heaps which the modern Greeks and Turks call tepe, lastly, in the more artificial shape of a pyramid in Egypt, they had universally the same origin. That's exactly what I've been saying, and this author agrees. They present the simplest and sublimest monuments which any generation could raise over the bodies of their progenitors, calculated for almost endless duration and speaking a language more impressive than the most studied epitaph upon Parian marble. When beheld in a distant evening's horizon, skirted by the rays of the setting sun, and touching, as it were, the clouds which hang over them, imagination pictures the spirits of heroes of remoter periods descending to irradiate the warrior's grave. So I just wanted to touch on that, and again, I could spend just 2 hours talking about the mounds and these fortifications that they find all over Ohio. But yeah, The correlation there I've made before, but I just wanted to share the author's point of view as well as show some more images. Let's get back to these articles here. American Antiquities. In Belmont County, Ohio, almost half a mile from the river Ohio, one of the ancient mounds has recently been opened and penetrated. This mound was 40 feet in diameter at the base, 16 feet high, and flat at the top, bearing upon it large trees with marks of a succession of growths which had decayed. The fifth stratum in this mound consisted of several layers of human bones, laid transversely in a great mass of decayed matter, 5 or 6 inches thick. These bones, which exposed to the air, would molder away, although they seemed solid when taken up. The toe and fingernails were nearly entire, the hair long, fine, and of a dark brown color. And by letting the dirt dry and brushing it off, it would bear to be combed and straightened out. Unless the bones were flints, one spear, I apologize, the quality, suitable to be inserted into the end of a long pole, and some pieces of iron 2 or 3 feet long, a kind of cut and thrust sword in their make. Now they're talking about swords they found. Their handles were ornamented with rings or ferrules of silver and lead, on which were the representations of terrapins and birds, and had also various triangular, rectangular, circular, and elliptical figures made with great mathematical exactness. So yeah, I mean, it's making me again the Grecian Roman type swords, with the incredible advanced workmanship on the handles. They describe in my Tennessee episode, I share an article where they find a scimitar, as they call it, or the blade of the Scythian. Now the Scythian had the exact same, quote, Scythian had this exact same burial style as these mounds that we're describing here, conical. In fact, if I have time, I'll go and I'll share one of these mounds that they uncover in Russia and show you how unbelievably similar it is to these ones we're talking about here. Okay, this is a really good one. It's a kind of a long one, and it bounces around a bit. It's a really long one. All righty. Let's see. Did I? Mm, okay. This will be easier for you guys to read, and I can zoom in. So I'm going to read it from here. Oh, it doesn't look like. Well, I tried. We're going to have to read it off here. This is one I shared from a long, long time ago. This one is unbelievable and definitely worth the long-winded read, I promise. And from here, we'll be able to kind of bounce around into some more Roman artifacts. Quote Roman. We'll show some coins, and then from there, we'll hop into talking about this kind of secret society of Cincinnati. And Cincinnati was called the city of seven hills. Now, again, there are over a dozen cities that are called the city of seven hills, but going with the theme of this episode and also kind of the underlying theme that's followed me through many of these episodes is Cincinnati the real Rome, or were there many Romes and Cincinnati was just one of them? Well, these ancient Roman artifacts are really pointing quite strongly to that. But yeah, so let's get into this one. It's a long one, so 181 of you, welcome again. Appreciate all of you, and thanks for sticking with me through some of these longer ones. Wonderful Caverns, PA, 1880. Prehistoric remains lately found in Missouri and Ohio. This is one that I left out of my Missouri episode on purpose, knowing I would get to this very episode, and here we are today, so I could read it here. If you haven't seen my Missouri episode, I strongly recommend it. Missouri is one of the biggest chock full states similar to Ohio, but really lays the groundwork for, they find a huge city, intact city, 300 feet below ground. Streets, fountains, buildings, everything. And as well as all the other things with the mounds and the buried buildings and the underground tunnels and the kind of Egyptian esque tunnel systems and statues they find underground in Missouri and Illinois is quite crazy. So this first part here is going to be from Missouri, but if you've seen that episode, it'll be great. And if you haven't, then you'll get a little taste of what my Missouri episode holds. So here we go. A correspondent describes a cave recently explored in Monroe County, Missouri. It is in a limestone ridge at the headwaters of Salt River, which empties into the Mississippi. Now, this is a good article because it's one author showing you the similarities that exist in multiple locations along the Mississippi. This ridge is known in the locality as the Narrows, and its rocky bluffs, rising to the height of 200 feet, present a bold and picturesque scene. It has had a local fame on account of the many Indian curiosities found there. Indian mounds are numerous on the rocky ledge, and Indian skulls, arrowheads, flint hammers, and iron and stone hatchets have been found in considerable numbers. A recent discovery there caused a correspondent to visit Mr. Waldron, the owner of the land, and this account is given of an exploration. Without much difficulty, I found Mr. Waldron, the discoverer of the temple, on whose land it is situated. He proposed, as it was late, that I should remain with him during the night and walk over and see the temple in the morning. I assented, and after supper, Mr. Waldron brought out some articles that he had found in the temple for my inspection. They were a bronze hatchet or hammer, having an eye and a heavy knob on the hammer portion, a rude bronze lance or arrowhead more than 6 inches in length, a piece of deer or elk horn about 9 inches in length, from which small branches were given off, and an elliptical piece of bronze on which was cut in a rude manner an imitation of the sun and some alphabetical characters closely resembling Phoenician. The next morning, Mr. Waldron and his 2 sons and I set out to visit the temple. Our way lay through a low bottom covered with a dense growth of timber. We soon found ourselves before the cleft in the rock, and after lighting a torch, we entered. The arch is elliptical, and for gracefulness of curve and beauty of finish, is not excelled by any of the works of the present day. Again, this temple hidden in this mountain is so exquisite, it's not excelled by any of the works of present day. Each stone is of the finest granite, polished as smooth as glass, and they sent back reflections of our torches like polished steel. The springer rests on an entablature, which is placed on the capital of a beautiful column, also hewn from granite. The keystone of the arch projects from the inferior stones and seems to have been finished with the view of placing an inscription thereon, but this was never done. Passing under the arch, we found ourselves in a room hewn out of solid limestone, 35 feet wide, 50 feet long, 30 feet high, and vaulted to the center, the ceiling being 45 feet from the floor to the middle of the room. At intervals of 10 feet are graceful, slender columns of granite with square base fantastically carved in imitation of some unknown plant. The shafts, like the shaft supporting the arch, are supported by a capital. Upon this rests a heavy entablature of magnesian limestone, which is closely fitted under the roof and gives the column the appearance of supporting the ceiling. The acoustic properties of the temple are remarkable. A whisper can be heard from one end of the room to the other. There are 12 columns in the temple, 6 on each side. Between the columns on each side of the temple and on each side of the arch or entrance to the temple are set into the wall blocks of polished gray and black granite, but there is no inscription on any of them. No sculpture of any kind, except the plants mentioned above, has been discovered. At the western portion of the room is a dais or raised platform of polished limestone, which supports a huge block of granite 5 feet long and 24 inches thick. On this is laid a slab of polished and beveled granite, smoother than marble. This slab projects over the block beneath it about 6 inches on all sides and is 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Evidently, this was an altar, for there are ashes scattered around. What was the character of the sacrifice? To the right of the altar is a small anteroom, which you enter through an arched doorway, evidently intended for the priest who attended to the duties of the altar. About this, there is nothing destructive. It is not even certain by what means it was shut off from the auditorium. The place is wonderfully dry. The ravages of time have not in the least impaired it, and every portion retains the freshness and glow that it had when it came from the hands of the workmen. It is undoubtedly one of the great curiosities of the age and is attracting the attention of archaeologists. An exhaustive report is now being prepared by a committee which is to be presented to the Historical Society of the State of Missouri, that it will add fresh interest to the study of the civilization that preceded the present Indian tribes of this country seems probable. Tablets, carving, and mummies in an Ohio cave. So that wrapped up the Missouri part, and now we're jumping to the Ohio part. Again, this is a long one, so thank you for sticking with me. I know it can be a little boring, but this is a 5-star article, one of my favorites. So again, tablets, carvings, and mummies in an Ohio cave. Adams County, Ohio is rich in remains of prehistoric mounds and fortifications and is the mecca of enthusiastic archaeologists. Most of the mounds are on alluvial bottom lands of the Ohio River. 17 miles northeast of Manchester is a prehistoric cavern in which wonderful discoveries have lately been made of great interest to the scientific world. They throw much light on the character and habits of this remarkable people, evidences of whose high civilization have been preserved to us. A correspondent of the New York Sun lately visited this cavern and gives this description of recent discoveries. The entrance to the cave is choked up with the debris of ages, but traces of a flight of steps are to be seen. The entrance is at the bottom of a sinkhole, which is nearly in the center of a level field. This field is 200 acres in extent and is bounded on all sides by lofty hills. It is about 25 feet from the surface of the ground to the bottom of the cave. I have been unable to learn when this cave was first discovered. It was known to the earliest settlers, and they no doubt learned of its existence from the Indians. It contains 9 chambers or rooms. These apartments are connected by narrow galleries. All but the third one from the entrance are mathematically regular in shape, being each about 30 feet in length, 20 feet in width, and 15 feet in height. The galleries are of the same height as the main rooms, but are only 6 feet wide. The excavation passes through a solid ledge of freestone, which is bisected about 100 feet from the mouth by a vein of limestone. The chamber where the limestone crops out is of irregular shape. The water has oozed through the limestone rock for ages and formed thousands of beautiful stalactites and stalagmites. The cave is much visited by picnic parties, and every corner of it has been thoroughly explored 1,000 times. Now, this is important because I've talked about a lot of these cave systems that show not only regular mathematical structure, but kind of organic looking structure. And but the fact that you have a perfect description of a mathematically shaped room, obviously either built or carved or both, that had then been filled with stalactites and stalagmites really gives an idea of the age that we're dealing with. Again, they don't talk about the height, but if it's filled with thousands of stalactites and stalagmites, well, I mean, again, depending on the flow, the water flow plays a big part, but you can calculate um, how long or how old stalactites and stalagmites are to within an approximate age. But just the appearance of them shows the antiquity of this room. The fourth chamber has a deep well in one corner, at the bottom of which is a stream of water. The depth of the well is unknown, but it must be several hundred feet. A few days ago, a party of gentlemen paid a visit to this cave, equipped to explore this mysterious well. 45 feet from the top of the well, they found the entrance to a second cavern, which proved to be the family tomb of a race of gigantic men. A narrow gallery which expanded as they left the well behind them opened into a lofty chamber, 225 feet long and 110 feet wide. The floors, walls, and roof of this immense room are smoothly finished. In the center of the apartment is a sarcophagus and mausoleum combined. The mausoleum at its base measures 55 by 35 feet. It is of simple though beautiful design and carved out of the solid rock. Its base is parallel on all sides. These panels containing bas reliefs, which are supposed to illustrate the four seasons in man's life: childhood, youth, manhood, and old age. At the ends of the bas reliefs are tables full of written characters resembling the Hebrew, presumed to be memoriams of the person or persons in whose honor the mausoleum is erected. The carving on the panels is of the most delicate description and is fully equal to the Grecian school of sculpture. In the limits of a newspaper article, they cannot be described as they deserve. From the floor to the top of this base is 6 feet. The base is hollowed out at the four corners, and these excavations are covered with slabs of freestone, accurately fitted and so firmly cemented that a cold chisel struck with a heavy hammer made little or no impression on the cement. They are uniform in size, measuring 5 by 12 feet. In the center of the mausoleum rises a couch, 2 feet 5 inches in height, 12 feet in length, and 5 feet in width. On this couch is extended the figure of a man. It is probably life size and measures 9 feet 4 inches in length. The limbs are finely proportioned and disposed in an easy and graceful manner. The arms are folded across the breast, and the fingers clasp a bunch of leaves. Remember, we read from an article the same thing, the exact same thing. A giant over 9 feet. This is a totally separate article. A giant found close to 9 feet with a winged helmet grasping leaves in his hand, resembling oak. The figure is partially nude, a mantle or scarf crossing the breast and falling over the loins in graceful folds. The face is one of great strength and beauty, and the outline and contour are decidedly Israelitish. 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 Israelites. 9 foot tall Grecian Israelites. The head is covered. Again, this is important. This is why I pointed this out when I read the shorter article that was from a different mound. This is not a mound. This is a temple. We're in a different place. So again, the helm, he's got the same exact, he's dressed almost identically as the man they found in the mound. So the helm was elegantly chased and kept in position by rods of metal. Okay, so the winged helm, the head is covered with a winged, looks like I clipped some of it off. Okay, winged helm, elegantly chased and kept in position by rods of the same metal. At each corner of the mausoleum rises a covered pyramidal column surmounted by caps that are unmistakably Dory. I don't know what that is. Dorie. Anybody in chat maybe knows. On two sides of the room are tombs of humbler design. They are side by side, uniform in size, and 20 in number, 10 on a side. Like the mausoleum, they are carved out of the solid rock and embellished with bas relief. On the front of each is a raised scroll covered with written characters similar to those on the panels of the mausoleum. So Phoenician. Hebraic Phoenician. On the wall of the room opposite to the entrance are painted 25 faces. They are faded and blurred, but still distinct enough to be deciphered. The colors used are red, yellow, black, and white, and were mixed with oil. The portraits are executed in a superior manner, and that the anatomical proportions of the features is preserved to an exact degree. The explorers opened one of the small tombs. It contained a splendidly preserved mummy, swathed in cloth, covered with a thick varnish, which emits a pleasant aroma odor, not unlike balsam of fir. The mummy measures 9 feet 1 inch in length, and the cloth with which it is wrapped, although of coarse texture, is skillfully woven. One of the party cut the wrappings from the face, but did it so clumsily that the head crumbled into dust. Portions of the hair remain sticking to the cloth, and your correspondent has some of it before him while this article is being written. It is black, curly, and of fine texture. Besides the body of the giant, the tomb contained a spearhead, a hatchet, 2 lances, 3 mattocks or hoes, a spade, a cup, 2 plates, and a small urn, all of copper. The smallest cup and one of the lances have been shown to your correspondent. These wonderful people understood the secret of hardening copper, for an ordinary file will barely scratch the lance, and the edge of a cold chisel turns up like lead when struck against it. The cup is of a softer metal and beautifully engraved with trailing vines and wreaths. A square package at the head of the tomb, wrapped in the varnished cloth, contained a book of 100 leaves of thin copper, fastened loosely at the top, and crowded with finely engraved characters similar to those already described. Thanks for sticking with me. We're almost there, guys. But again, this is one of my favorite articles of all time. The Sun representative visited the cave and examined it thoroughly. The upper cave was evidently the cellar of a house above ground and used for domestic purposes or as a place of retreat in case of an attack by an enemy. So you get what they're saying here. They're saying that the first rooms that they excavated, or not excavated, but explored before they went down the well and found this even further buried, was the cellar to a house. So a stone house that lied on the surface but was destroyed. Who knows? Burnt, taken away by a flood? No idea. But this tomb, again, 40 feet below that one, that was already 25 feet below surface level, right? Crazy. In the first two chambers and in the last five are many curious blocks of stone shaped like tables, and bricks which have theretofore been thought of natural origin. The marks of chisel and pick are found on them. However, these artificial agents formed the whole cavern. The irregularity of the limestone chamber is due to natural causes. In all probability, this room was dry when the wonderful people who designed and built it were alive. The stalactites and stalagmites have formed since. I measured one of the largest of the former. Okay, perfect. They get into this. It was 5 feet 6 and 1/2 inches from the base to the apex, allowing that it lengthened at the rate of 1 inch every 50 years, which a geological friend tells me is very rapid. It would have been 3,325 years reaching its present length. Conjecture alone can fix the date of the last occupancy of the cave. It must have been years before the stalactites began to form, of course. The owner of the farm on which the cave is situated has associated with himself several gentlemen of capital, and they intend opening the tombs and the big mausoleum, putting stairways, and then advertising the curiosities and throwing the cave open to the general public. Mr. Grooms is anxious to have the cave examined by an expert, and an account of the discoveries, together with the engraved book and the tools found in the tomb, will be at once forwarded to the Smithsonian Institution. Yeah, and we know what happened after that. This, I mean, again, for my listeners that have been with me for a long time, how many of these amazing stories end with we forwarded it to the Smithsonian and then you never hear about it again? You just never hear about it. But yeah, that was long-winded, but I hope it was worth listening to that. Unbelievable. And this is going to kind of lead us into the wrapping up of this episode, where we start to kind of talk a little bit more about what I have been correlating and saying, that the the stories of the Bible that we've traced all the way from California, even Alaska, right? The largest ancient vessel ever found was found in Alaska. We covered that in episode 1. And the Native Americans, the Indians of Alaska, who were aware of the story of Noah, but they obviously had their own descriptions. They even said that it was Noah's Ark. The ship was 1,200 feet long. We talk about some of these scriptural references and some of these overlays that these, quote, Native Americans, that their stories of their forefathers and the people that came before them, they talk about a deluge. They talk about these things. They have these biblical stories. There are so many endless overlays. And then again, going back with what lies below, right? In this article so amazingly shows, and so many of my other episodes, again, hundreds of now, episode or almost 20 episodes in, and I've only shared, 1% of what I've found throughout those, 20 episodes, about 2 hours each worth of material, but it's building quite an amazing story. But yeah, so hope you enjoyed that one. Again, it's probably like top 5 articles for me, and holding on to that one, not doing a video because I knew I would eventually get there in this series was really difficult. I've been doing that with a lot of material. Again, as I sort through this stuff to build these episodes up for you guys, it's just amazing rereading some of this, and you forget about stuff. I've clipped thousands and thousands of these. I've shared thousands over my decade plus on Twitter, and you just can't remember them all. So it's fun to reread some of these. I forgot even portions of that one again that the guy mentioned that he measured the stalactites. Like I forgot that part. But mind blowing. 9 foot tall Israelites found in a stone mausoleum. Mummies. Again, we've got mummies in every state, all the way to California. We have mummies. So that America has more mummies than Africa, Egypt, period. In fact, again, in Colorado episode, we covered that the governor was pleading with the federal government because they were stealing mummies and shipping them to Europe. And then we covered in, I think it was New Mexico. We talk about one of the princes of Sweden or Denmark. I can't remember, but it's in the episode. Was caught stealing mummies and shipping them to Europe as well. Now, there's the Egyptian government, in the 60s and the 70s was kind of their what they were presenting was being questioned quite heavily, but now it's just completely swallowed as truth. It seems to me likely that a lot of the history of that area, I think, has been obfuscated and we've been kind of misled. But yeah, wow, long one. I'm going to skip a little bit ahead. Stone enclosed. Okay, perfect. This is okay. So I kind of put this in a way that it'll transition the way I wanted it to. Okay, perfect. Let's go to again. We broke 200 there. We dipped below that a little bit, but that's great. I wanted to get back, and break that 200 mark live. That's got to have goals. That's a big one. Appreciate you guys. Thanks for bearing with me. Again, I know those long ones can be tough to sit through and listen to, but man, amazing, amazing stuff there in that article. I'm trying to find one specific one, so give me a sec here. We're going to end this with more Roman. Okay, here we go. So this is from 1881. Someone has discovered that the English alphabet was the invention of a prehistoric Ohio man. Now just think of the article that I read. Ancient Hebrew phonetics, did that originate here? Right? We talked about the dodecahedron. Plato and Pythagoras and all these people, is this, an older version of that or a misrepresented one? A major BB has found in the mounds near Piqua, Ohio, pieces of slate which bear upon their surface hieroglyphics similar to the English alphabet. The most significant detail of this identification is that the forms of the letters are all almost precisely those that occur about the Mediterranean, and whose phonetic values have been exactly determined by Alois Hess in his standard work on the classification of old Spanish coins. Interesting correlation there in Spanish coins. But should this identification be correct, the point arises where the alphabet originated, whether in this country or in the old. Major BB claims to have traced each form of letter to Aboriginal American picture symbols, in which the same significance obtains in both European and American forms. It has always been a matter of theory that Ohio was the promised land that Moses and the children of Israel were hunting for so long, and that they struck Canaan by mistake. You read something like that by itself, you're like, oh, that's crazy. But you go off what those gentlemen just found. And this guy, I think he's probably relating to that, and not only that, but again, what I'm going to share with you here is just a tiny fraction of the quote Roman and Israelite and Grecian artifacts found here in the Americas. We're going to go back to where we were right after that last one. Yeah. And how much time do we have? We got about 20 minutes. All right. American Antiquities. What was the date on this one? 1860. Certain strange inscriptions, supposed to be ancient Hebrew, on stones found in one of the mysterious ancient mounds in Ohio, considered in connection with the hieroglyphic rocks, which ever since the settlement of Ohio arrested attention on the Sciota River. Again, Scota, Scotland, as well as the prevalence of the celebrated mounds themselves, are circumstances which led a correspondent of the Cleveland plain dealer to make the following remarks. From unanswerable facts and statistics, it is evident that the great valleys of the Ohio and Mississippi were once the abode of a mighty nation, civilized and refined, warlike and brave, descendants of those mighty nations to whom I have alluded, the Hebrews, and who settled, again, we're talking about a language, Hebrew, because there were no, quote, Hebrews, right? Who settled in this country long before the appearance of the Savior on the earth. Yeah, long before, right? We just had that 3,300 year estimation with just the stalactite and stalagmite growth. Near Lexington, Kentucky, are the remains of an ancient catacomb formed in a solid rock of limestone. This curiosity was discovered in the year 1776 by the early settlers of that country. The mouth of the cavern was carefully concealed with stones, which, on being removed, opened into a cave of immense magnitude. If you want more from that one, check out my Kentucky episode. We talk about how in one Kentucky cave they found over 3,000 mummies, and they burned almost all of them. The sides of this spacious apartment were found upon examination to be cut into niches or compartments. Sounds just like the previous ones we've been reading. Occupied by figures representing men. But further investigation, these figures were discovered to be mummies. Now we're in a different state, you guys. We're finding the same exact description. Persons preserved by the art of embalming and exhibited a state of perfection equal to that known at any time among the Egyptians. And you will bear in mind that this art was practiced by the people 3,400 years and 75, the way they said 3,475 years previous to this discovery. That's like exactly the date of that tomb they just described in Ohio. And this is bouncing between Kentucky and Ohio. The catacomb was capable of holding 2,000 subjects. And this is one of many. Go back to my Kentucky episode if you want more on this subject, because Kentucky's insane too. Again, there is found on the Ohio, nearly 20 miles below Wabash River, another remarkable work of antiquity. It is a very large cave with smooth perpendicular walls and a level floor. The walls are covered with hieroglyphic figures cut in solid stone and are well executed. Among them are representations of animals unknown to the present generation. This goes back to episode 1. They find representations of animals, quote, tropical animals that are unknown to the age. They either don't exist or they exist in southern latitudes. This cave is one of the greatest curiosities on the Ohio and is connected with a dark, dismal cavern nearly the same size, which is located directly above it and which is accessible through a chimney-like aperture. When we view the ancient mounds and tumuli of the West, we are lost in wonder in view of the number, magnitude, and the obscurity of their origin. There are several hundreds of these works in the valleys of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers and some of them are found to be filled with thousands of human skeletons, indicating that they were a place of deposit for the dead. They also bear the appearance of having been contiguous to some large and populous city. Many strange and curious antiquities have been, from time to time, exhumed from these mounds, and it is not significant that in a great majority of instances there exists a remarkable resemblance between these relics found in the 19th century and articles which were known to have been used among the Romans, Grecians, and Egyptians before the days of Christ. Absolutely. Unbelievable. Connecting the dots more and more. Gonna stick on this old world, new world biblical narrative theme here. Again, I apologize for the clumsiness of reading these off of my thread here. Gotta find out where I was. Gotta bounce around. Okay, here we go. The ancient mounds in Ohio. And what's the time for this one? 1851. In the American Scientific Convention, now sitting at Albany, New York, Professor J.W. Foster, a U.S. geologist, has read a paper descriptive of samples of ancient cloth from the mounds of Ohio. Mr. Foster said that as far back as 1837, specimens of the same cloth had been presented to him, but he questioned the reality of it and feared to make it public, lest he should be the means of propagating an error. You hear about that too, like, oh boy, this goes against the narrative. I'm just going to keep this to myself. The specimens are of a different texture. One may have been made by the ordinary means of weaving, but the other is evidently the result of some handicraft. There seems to be some connection between the Peruvians and the mound builders. The present specimens were taken from a mound about 2 miles from Middletown, Ohio. It is evident the Indians never made this cloth, for they did not understand weaving, and they did not obtain it from Europe, for it is not such as would have been made for their trade. The cloth goes towards authorizing a distinction between the North American Indians and the mound builders. Yeah, we already identified that. They say that themselves. It is composed of a material closely allied to hemp. Dr. Goby said that it was easy to distinguish between the fiber of flax and that of cotton. The former is round and solid, while the other presents the appearance of a vegetable tube. Professor Agassiz suggested that this cloth might be made of nettles. He said he had seen such in Switzerland, and on the first view, it was his impression that the cloth in question was made of the North American nettle. Professor Renwick of Newark then inquired if this was not spoken of by Columbus in his discovery. It was his impression that it was. His impression that Columbus had mentioned this odd fabric amongst the people living here. Okay, what do we got left? Roman, 1814. Okay, perfect. We got 3 left and 10 minutes to go. Appreciate you guys for sticking with me. Where are we at? 213. Amazing. Discovery of mysterious subterranean vaults. Ohio, 1859. Great excitement in Jackson County, Ohio. Discovery of mysterious subterranean vaults. The following letter, which has been forwarded to us, if reliable, presents some interesting facts that are well worthy of investigation. The parties mentioned are said to be well known in Jackson County. Our village is full of wonder and excitement. Martin, Marker, J.W. Hughes, and Washington Long, in digging a grave in the cemetery near this village, about 10 o'clock this morning, came to a large, flat stone about 4 feet below the surface, which stopped their further progress until they procured assistance and removed the stone from its resting place of ages, when it was found to have closed the entrance to a subterranean vault. All efforts thus far to enter it with a light have proved unsuccessful on account of the foul air with which it is filled. By means of a rake, human bones of gigantic size have been raised, and a small chain of silver with coins attached to each end. The coins, though much defaced by time, have the appearance of those in use among the Romans in the days of Scipio Africanus, though there were evident traces of hieroglyphic devices that cannot be deciphered. The men at the cemetery have, by means of burning straw, made light in the vault, and though none have the courage to venture further than the entrance, it has been discovered that there is immediately to the west of the opening a chamber about 10 feet square, with steps, quite dilapidated, down its eastern side. 3 other chambers branch out from this, one to the north, one to the west, and one to the south. We are all curious, of course, to know when and by whom these vaults were made and filled. Reverend Mr. Hunter and Mr. Armstrong and Mr. Knopf have examined them as well as they could without going down into it. Also, the bones raked out in the chain coins, and all give it as their opinion that these vaults were made by the same people who built the mounds in the southeastern part of the state. The question presents themselves to everyone: who made these vaults and filled them? Was our country once the home of giants? P.S. 4.5 PMW long after the straw had burnt in the first vault for some time. He ventured down to make an examination, but the air was so impure that he could not remain there but for a few minutes. Though long enough to discover that the walls of the vaults were substantially built of smooth, well-shaped stone, and that there were large numbers of bones in them. Persons will arrive here from Sydney and Greenville tomorrow, and every exertion will be made for a thorough examination of this house of the dead. Sounds just like all the other ones. Giant bones, the exact same type of construction, steps leading down. And again, the part, as much as all of this is amazing, again, he was able to get down there and see that it was substantially built of smooth, well-shaped stone. And I was able to find one of these coins, Roman coins. Got your kind of typical Roman helmet here. Roman, which Trojan, which you find this helmet all over Central America. And I've shared a few of them over the years on Twitter where they find what they call Roman helmets in some of these mounds. Roma. Where is Roma? It's funny, like when you study the word Roma and the connection with the gypsies. And again, I've made quite a few posts about that, but I don't want to get too far off subject there. But here's likely a similar, I wouldn't say this is exactly it, of course, but likely a similar type of coin that they found on this silver chain with this giant. Was he 9 feet tall like the other ones? Seems likely. That's 3 or 4 distinctly similar tombs we've now shown just in these few articles I've shared here. Just a few minutes left, wrapping this up. I'm going to pick and choose here. Appreciate all of you guys. 224, hitting the peak towards the end. All right. Okay. Ooh, Minerva. From Marietta, Ohio. The bowl of a brass spoon that had once been tinned was dug up in a covert way in this town and is now in the possession of Dr. Hildreth of the following description. At the junction of the handle with the bowl is an oval impress bearing the letters I, the residue obliterated, which may signify primo agmine and possibly belong to the first corps of Roman infantry. Within the concave of the spoon are impressed literally the letters IMP, an abbreviation, no doubt, of the word imperator, commander or emperor. The military way in this town was constructed with great labor and art, and in many respects coincides with the description of Roman highways and camps in England. That's exactly like we were saying earlier. Even the man describing that fort on the top of the bluff, when he was talking about the gravel road, the advanced roads, and that he could see roads connecting the mounds leading away from the hilltop fort, exactly as this guy's alluding to, I'm sure, is that they find these roads all over this region. What do we want to do? One or two more? Okay, one or two more here. These are some quick ones. And this one's from when? 1814. We learn by letter from Mr. I.T. Jack, a gentleman of respectability, that in the country of Warren, on the Miami, in the state of Ohio, within one of those ancient fortifications, like the ones I just showed you in that book, there was a stone not long since discovered, upwards of 3 feet in length and about 15 inches in circumference, fixed perpendicularly in the earth. On the west side, it is marked thus 1181. Now, again, is that a date? I don't know. Seems likely. SI, and on the east, with a figure resembling a half moon carved into the stone, a fourth of an inch and 3 inches in length. We have stated the above facts on which the public may rely with confidence, expecting that they may afford ground for inquiry and speculation to the learned and inquisitive. Okay, there's a specific one I want to read. I already read that one, right? Regular fortification. I'm going to get that one. There's a specific one I want. Here we go. All right. I think we'll wrap it up with this one, guys. Okay. I appreciate you all so much. This will be the last one for the night. We'll call it an episode. I didn't even get into my PDFs. Holy smokes, you know. And I was going to get into the Order of Cincinnatus. This was a secret fraternal order. It's called the Order of Cincinnatus. I posted about it many times. It's named after this gentleman here, Lucius Quintus Cincinnatus. And it was going to be this kind of overarching idea that perhaps Cincinnati has a lot more in common with Rome than we think, and that this secret society of Cincinnati, the Order of Cincinnatus, who named themselves after this, and where Cincinnati gets its name, is based on more of historical fact than we're led to believe. And that was where I was going to go with that, but obviously, due to time, there's no way. I might make a follow-up video and talk about some of these articles here. Prehistoric pearls. This gets into what kind of giant animals and clams and people existed to grow pearls so large that they were as big as big grapes and blah 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 blah. But obviously, this is where we're going to end it. So yeah, ancient records in Ohio, 1861. The Ethnological Society of New York, on Thursday night, commenced the investigation of a stone box and tablet from a mound 45 feet high at Newark, Ohio. It was the second inscribed stone that was under discussion. A Hebrew pronounced it genuine and ancient. When found, the stone was enclosed in a smooth spheroidal struggle with that one, stone box. Okay, so a perfectly smooth stone spherical box. These little advanced, stoneworks, about 8 inches long, cemented by a whitish substance not yet analyzed, singularly placed in grooves, but was opened by a seam running longitudinally through the middle. So it's like a perfect little spherical box that they open right down the middle. On the upper side of the former is the figure of a man. So on top of this little circular chest on the top is this carving of a man in relief with a beard and a large gown, with the very square Hebrew letters M, Sh, H. And one of my subscribers told me that that's Moses backwards. Over the head, and with an elevated rim containing characters likewise engraved, and all other parts of the stone, except a kind of handle, are covered in like manner. This stone was deciphered by Reverend John W. McCarty, pastor of the Episcopal Church in Newark, and proved to contain an abstract of the Ten Commandments. The alphabet employed is not yet found in Genesis, but most of the letters are easily recognized by resemblance to the square, block Hebrew, ancient Hebrew, square, or common Hebrew print. Ten Commandments carved in stone inside a beautiful, perfectly spherical little chest found inside an Ohio mound. And yeah, that's where we're gonna end it. That's it. Wrapping her up. 227. Ending strong. Want to thank all of you guys for being here. We'll just rush through and you know, thank everybody for being here. Justin, Danico. Hey Danico, good to see you. Long time. Paisley, welcome. Take a little trip with me. Oh, shouted you out earlier. Well, Black, thanks for being here. Lucy, as always. Brett, glad you stuck it out. Jen, William. Oh, Twilight Mist, good to see you. Long time. Real Simple Earth. Kiki, thanks for sticking it out. Everybody, all of you. I know how these they can get a little monotonous with some of these. But yeah, 2 hours on the dot pretty much. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll make sure to include a link to this thread. Again, anyone can look at it. You don't need an account. And yeah, you'll be able to just click on this and it'll have this exactly as I'm showing. No, I'm not showing it here, but um present. It doesn't matter. You've seen it. I'll have it in the description and you'll be able to just kind of run through and check it out and get the dates and yeah. Haven't quite decided what the next episode is going to be. I might leave it to a vote. I'm not quite sure yet. Kind of depends on how well organized I feel about my next two states and where the information goes. But as always, thanks for being here. Appreciate you guys. Broke back into the 200 views. That really is that's great. After taking almost 40 days off of posting anything at all. Um, I'm really happy to be back and doing this again. And stay tuned for more content like this. I'll be finishing up my Yucatan series over the next week or two. And yeah, look forward to next week and stay tuned. If I do decide to do a vote, I'll post the vote in Twitter and on YouTube so everyone gets a chance. And yeah, love you guys. And look forward to reading your comments and seeing what you thought about some of these articles. And as always, love you guys. Have a wonderful night. Thanks for spending your time with me. Time is everything. It's the most valuable commodity. So I'm grateful to have you here with me. It means a lot. And yeah, blessings. Have a wonderful night, guys. Bye.